Las Vegas has come out with the 2025 way too early season win totals for SEC teams. South Carolina, are they getting disrespected? Spoiler alert, yes. We talk about all that and more. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I am your host, Chris Marler, and I hope everyone is having a good Wednesday when we are recording this in a snowy, white-covered state of South Carolina. At least it is here in Lexington over here in the Midlands. So hope everyone has been safe, having fun, going to play out in the snow, all that good stuff. I know Pepper, our show mascot, has had a great time with it as well. So want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you to everyone that makes Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, guys, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's show, we're going to get into something that it always cracks me up. Like, as soon as the season ends, the way too early predictions and projections for next season already begin. And it's one of my least favorite things, I think, from growing up, at least. Like, my least favorite thing was seeing, okay, somebody just got crowned national champion, and then you watch SportsCenter. It's like, do they win next year? It's like, I don't know. Like, the confetti still hasn't even all fallen yet from whatever stadium or arena or whatever like they've been in. That is still the case. I think like it's one of my least favorite things to have to come up with in terms of predictions. But from a content standpoint, it is a lot of fun to talk about, especially early on, because it's going to be a long offseason. I think we're like 213 days away from week 0 in college football. So the sportsbook.ag, the guys and girls over there, have come out with their way too early season win total predictions for 11 of the 16 SEC teams. 11 of 16. South Carolina was included. And right off the bat, you guys warned me about this last year. It shocked me then. It probably shouldn't shock me as much now, but it still kind of does. The disrespect. The disrespect from South Carolina, or for South Carolina going to next year, is just as real as ever. The season over-under for win totals is 6.5 wins for South Carolina. Now, why is that shocking to me? It's shocking to me because we just saw them win 9 games, and it's even more shocking to me because I will tell you this. As of right now, going into next season, the one prediction I will make that I will stand on and feel very, very confident in the entire offseason. Every preseason magazine, every preseason ranking, top 25, whether it's the AP, coaches, Phil Steele, Athlon, Lindy's, any of that stuff, I would be shocked to see South Carolina ranked outside of the top 15. I would continue that and say I'd be shocked to see them outside of the top 20 or 25, even more so. There will not be a publication in America, unless it's made by Clemson fans, that South Carolina will not be ranked in the preseason. Flat out, bottom line. They will be top 15 in almost every single one of them. We've seen some of the way too early predictions from Ari Wasserman and Andy Staples, where they are projected in the top 10. I think you've seen them as high as 7 in some places from on 3. Now, I think 7 might be a little bit strong, maybe. But my whole point is, if you're going to be a top 15 or 20 team, which they clearly are, the way they ended the season, the way you have all this momentum going into next season, 6.5 wins, it just feels disrespectfully low. And that's the only way I know to put it. And here's the thing. Usually when Vegas tells you something, Vegas is telling you everything. And there's a saying my old baseball coach in college used to always say, by saying nothing, we've said everything. Vegas sets these lines. They're not telling you, oh, yeah, I think this team is 7 points better than this team. What they're trying to do is create an even amount of betting on both sides so they can make sure they don't lose a ton of money one way or the other. That's how they make money in the long run. That is why that is how like betting lines are made. Point blank period from Vegas. But when you start to see line movement or things like that, a really good example of this, like Vegas is telling you something, right? Really good example of that is last year's Oklahoma-South Carolina game. That line opened as Oklahoma was like a 4.5, 5-point favorite. By kickoff, or the day before, I think at kickoff, South Carolina was a 1-point favorite. I told you guys during that week, I was like, the wrong team is favored. It's very clear. And obviously we all know what happened on the field that day. So usually Vegas is really, really good. It goes without saying, Vegas is really, really good. There's that old saying that, like, they didn't build a bunch of billion-dollar casinos out in the middle of the desert out of losing money, right? They are really, really good at what they do. And you'll watch, whether it's basketball games or football games or whatever, how many times you watch something, it's like, oh, yeah, the over-under this game is 46.5, and the score is, 24-22, 24-23. Like, they are really good at what they do. If there's a place where Vegas is not good at, it is the way too early predictions, and there's a reason why they don't take a ton of money on these types of things this far in advance. Like I said, 213 days until football season. Let's look at the projected win totals they've laid out for everyone, okay? South Carolina's at 6.5. Georgia, Texas lead the way in the SEC with 10.5 projected wins. Tennessee is third with 9.5. They have Ole Miss and Bama at 9 wins. LSU at 8.5. A&M at 8, Oklahoma at 7, Florida and South Carolina at 6.5, Auburn at 5.5. I'm telling you right now, if I'm betting any amount of my money or our lovely live producer Allie's money, the three that I'm hammering the most are the bottom three on here: Florida, South Carolina, Auburn, and those last two especially. South Carolina at 6.5 wins after what they just did. Now, they've got a lot of production to replace, especially defensively. But are we really going to sit here and say, okay, listen, you're going to play the same schedule, right? Now you replace Old Dominion with Virginia Tech. I don't think Virginia Tech's particularly good. So I think that's going to be a win. You're already an 8.5-point favorite in that game from some early lines in Vegas. I think they will win that game. But 6.5. Now, let's backtrack a second here, because I just told you how great Vegas is at what they do, right? Like that's how good they are, right? Let's go through the win totals from a season ago and see just how close they were. Georgia and Texas, 10.5. One went over, one went under, both by half. Bama, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Tennessee, LSU, all at 9.5 wins. Now they got 4 out of those, right? LSU was the only one that they were at 8, so they were a game and a half off. A&M, 8.5, spot on. Then it gets interesting. Oklahoma and Auburn were at 7.5 total over/under wins for the preseason in 2024. Oklahoma won 6, Auburn won 5. Kentucky was at 6.5. Now again, also keep in mind, all of these teams were listed ahead of South Carolina, all of them, and we know where they all ended up in comparison to South Carolina. Kentucky, 6.5. They ended with 4. South Carolina, Florida, Arkansas. They were all at 5.5. Florida won 7. Arkansas won 6. South Carolina won 9. You win 0 for 3. 0 for 3 on that. Mississippi State, 4.5. They won 2 games. Vanderbilt, 2.5. They won 6. So if there's one thing that I'm taking away from these numbers from last year to this year, it's Vegas may be really good at Texas and Georgia and Bama and Mizzou and Ole Miss and Tennessee. I think if anybody was looking at those teams, they would have said, yeah, I think around 9 or 10 wins, because the ceiling from 9 wins and 10 wins, or 9.5 and 10.5, what Vegas is telling you, the ceiling there is much closer to the total amount of games you can play. It's all regular season games, right? It's 12 games. It's not including a bowl game or anything in the postseason. So the ceiling is much closer to the floor, the proverbial floor here, in terms of where the actual projection is. It's easier to hit there. Like, yeah, none of us thought Georgia was going to go 8-4. Nobody thought that. I mean, maybe some people thought Bama was going to go 7-5. I don't know, but like you look at their hit or miss rate being a half game off, right? Which is, if you're setting it 10.5 and one of them wins, you win 10 or 11 games. You've nailed it for Vegas. The 7 teams that they have listed at 9.5 or 10.5 wins, 6 of them are right there. Then you drop it down 8.5. Anyone that they had listed at 8.5 wins or more, they 7 out of those 8 predictions were within a half game of what they predicted. That's great. But it takes me back to my one takeaway, which is everything under that, they weren't even close. They weren't even close. There was one team in the bottom 8, where they were within one game. Or I'm sorry, they were within a half game of their prediction. And that was Arkansas. They predicted Arkansas at 5.5. They won 6. But everything else, they were off by at least a game and a half from what they actually won. With South Carolina, they were off by 3.5, which was more than any other team in the SEC. So, can South Carolina win more than 6.5 games? Yeah. Every other team that you just listed from the bottom 8 they predicted was way off of what Vegas had predicted. And South Carolina, lo and behold, even though they won 9 games this past season, they are in the exact same spot in the bottom half on the bottom couple of lines here on the graphic that I've made, at least from the visual standpoint, of every other team in the conference. The bottom 3 teams they have listed here: Auburn 5.5, Florida 6.5, South Carolina 6.5. You'd almost rather be there. There's so much more room for Vegas's error, which we just saw is exactly what they did. That is all for the first part of the show. Shocker, we went long again. But before we move on, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Prize Picks. You guys, this is a perfect transition because we just talked about how easy it is to make bets nowadays, especially with a fantastic app like Prize Picks. And Prize Picks, you're not going to pick over/under win totals, but all you have to do to make money on this incredible app is just say more or less over or under certain players, parlay them together, and you can win a ton of money. So listen, this message, like I said, is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. It's the only place to get real money sports action quite like this. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of your football action. Now it's football playoff time in the NFL. Obviously, we just ended with the college football season, but the NFL playoffs are still ongoing, and we have 3 weeks left, including Super Bowl. There's no better way to get on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. All you have to do is pick more or less from at least 2 players. And if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times the money you put down just by making a few simple picks. In the meantime, sign up today. If you are ready to run your game at the end of this football season, download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 just for playing, win or lose. So don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, we are going to run our game to a quick little commercial break, and we'll be right back. You guys ever get into a situation where you're in the middle of talking about something, and while you're talking about it, a light bulb goes off of I'm seeing things clearly now. That's kind of how I felt in that last segment. South Carolina, again, the numbers are just so low. And what's weird about it is this. Let me pull this up to make sure I'm on the safe side here. 2025 National Championship odds. They've already released some of these early odds for next year. And like I said, these are from Sports Betting AG, but you can see it from several different places. They don't let you put a ton of money on it, but it's always an interesting insight as to where you can get some of these odds. So again, I keep going back to this. Lenore Sellers has, I think, the 8th or 6th or 8th best odds to win the Heisman at plus 1,400. To put that in perspective, that's right around where in the preseason Jackson Dart and Jalen Milrose numbers were. I think theirs were a little bit higher, but that's right around. Garrett Nussmeier has the best odds as of right now. I think the one behind him is Arch Manning, of course, because his last name. But if you're telling me that what teams are going to compete for a national championship, you look at the numbers from at least what Vegas is sending us. Ohio State has the best odds. Right behind them, Texas at 2. Oregon is tied with them. Georgia right behind them. It's a who's who, right? It's the same teams. It seems like every preseason. Penn State behind them. Notre Dame, Alabama at plus 1,600. Tennessee's right behind them, tied for 8th. Clemson's tied with Tennessee at 8. LSU has the 10th best odds at plus 2,000. You keep scrolling. South Carolina is sitting here at plus 4,000, which I believe is right in the middle of the pack in the SEC for their win totals. But it's also in the top 15 to 16 teams in the country. If you're telling me that they have those good of odds to finish in that high of a ranking, or like in comparison to other teams around the country, which is what you're telling me with the national championship odds, 6.5 games does not align with that. And it's one of the reasons I just think there's a ton of value there. Now, listen, they could win 7 games. It would be a massive disappointment. But I keep looking at this and I'm like, where are the losses? Where are the losses coming from? You got to go to LSU. You got to go to Mizzou. I'm just doing off the top of my head. You got to go to Ole Miss. So those are 3 pretty tough road games. You get Oklahoma at home. You get Bama at home. You get Clemson at home. The road game against Virginia Tech, there's going to be a massive South Carolina contingent there in the Dome. We'll be there. It'll be a great time. It'll be a mile and a half from where we'll be living. I mean, like, what other games? Like Kentucky's at home. You know, and here's the other part too. One of the things that South Carolina has that very few other teams in the conference have going into next year is a proven commodity at quarterback. Like Texas is going into next season with just so much, I would call it certain uncertainty. Everyone is just absolutely certain they're going to be legit next year. Now, they lost a ton of talent on offense. They're going to lose both tackles, including one that might be the highest drafted tackle in the country in Kelvin Banks. They're going to lose a ton of talent at receiver, tight end. Their offense is going to have to be almost completely new. And I love Sark. I think he's great. And maybe Arch Manning will just be everything we think he is. But everything that they think he is a surefire first-round pick, maybe top 5, number 1 overall. That's a lot of ifs that have to happen, and a lot of what's the best way to put this? A lot of people would have to be really, really right about that kid based off of the very, very little we've seen from him. Tennessee's got a quarterback coming back with Nico, who was meh this year. And you could argue that this was the year out of all of them that they were going to go on a run. Like what he had surrounding him this year is most likely going to be better offensively, and as a whole team, especially, it'll be better than what he has next year. There's no way that their defense is going to be as good as it was this year, especially when you lose a guy like Pierce off the edge. There's just no way. There's no way that receiving group is going to be as deep as it was this year when you lose guys like Brew McCoy and other guys that like have been in the portal and Squirrel White and like guys have been starters and played significantly for 2 or 3 years. Garrett Nussmeier is another one that also plays for a team that has a proven commodity quarterback coming back, right? Like from what I've seen and what I just told you, he has the best odds to win the Heisman for next year. Now, as somebody that works closely with a lot of people around LSU, I think Nussmeier's great. I think he's great. We've also seen what Nussmeier looks like when he is under duress. It's the exact opposite of what we see from Lenore Sellers. Like Lenore Sellers kind of thrives when he's like running for his life. You saw it against Clemson. You saw it against Mizzou. His ability to improvise is unlike any other quarterback in the country. But you look at Nussmeier, and it's the exact opposite. Like we saw what happened against A&M. We saw what happened against South Carolina. You put someone in his face, and as long as the refs just keep a flag in their pocket, I mean, he will make enough mistakes to lose you a game. We saw it against A&M. We saw it against Alabama. We saw it against South Carolina. You know, and he's about to lose 4 out of his starting 5 offensive linemen from what is without a doubt the best offensive line in program history. Going to lose his best receiver in Kyron Lacey. They have a lot to replace there offensively. South Carolina has a lot to replace on defense. Outside of the interior offensive line and Rocket Sanders, they don't have a ton to replace on offense. And what they have, especially from a projection, projectability, high ceiling, whatever you want to say, potential, their quarterback, the one that's in Columbia, South Carolina, has more of that and a higher ceiling and a better long-term possibility of being elite than any of the other guys I just mentioned. So, again, I know what Georgia usually has. I know we just expect them to be great. But I'm looking at the teams that are currently ahead of South Carolina, at least for the win totals. And you got Oklahoma, A&M, LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, and Georgia. It's 8 teams. 8 teams. You just go through it real quick. And I'm counting it right now. I'm talking about two of those 8 teams have quarterbacks that are returning. Sorry. 3 of the 8 teams have quarterbacks that are returning. One of them's Nessmeyer, who we just talked about. The other one's Marcel Reed, who's okay. He got beat by 24 or 28 when he came to Columbia. That's going to be a tough trip to Kyle Field, but like that's Marcel Reed's the other one. And then Tennessee with Nico. Now, South Carolina doesn't play Tennessee. I wish they would have, because I think that would have been that probably would have been a win, and I think they would have beaten Tennessee. But here's the thing. There's just no way you can sit here with a straight face after what we just saw in the numbers I just told you from the 2024 projected win totals and say, yeah, you know what? I think Gunnar Stockton's going to go out there and beat the world. With all the flaws we saw that Georgia had this year, I think they're going to be great. I think Texas is going to pick up right where they left off, even though they're losing everyone. Ole Miss and Alabama, they both had 9 wins. They're about to bring in 2 kids to start that are like 18 years old. I mean, the kid Austin Simmons from Ole Miss, he entered college at 16. He was 17 this year. The kid coming in from Bama that's most likely, I think, going to start, Keelan Russell, he will be a true freshman. And then the kid from Oklahoma should be good, but it's under a new coordinator. It's in a new offense. They have a ton to replace because they've lost the second most players, I think, of any team in the SEC to the portal this year, well into the 20s. I think it's like 26, 27. All of those are new quarterbacks and new situations. South Carolina has arguably the most stability of any of those teams I just mentioned. So 6.5 wins, it's too low. It's too low. And again, just to be frank, it's a slap in the face to come off 9 wins when Vegas projected them to win 5.5. It's a slap in the face to win 9 and then get projected to win 1 total more game going into next year, especially when you have the exact same schedule. So that is all for today's show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Before we go, I do want to give a quick shout out to another one of our friends from the friend of the show, and it's a new friend of the show, Talkspace. All right, thank you to our live producer, Allie. Done a great job. Shout out to Pepper, been quiet the whole time. All right, so let's get into Talkspace. Here's the deal, guys. I think you guys could probably guess just from the way that I react, especially in post games. Therapy's great. Therapy's a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, and it makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. It's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most uninsured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health than it is with Talkspace. As a listener of this podcast, listen up. You'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. Guys, let's all get mentally healthier together because this basketball season is gonna need it. We're gonna need it, I'm sure. We're still less than 30 days till baseball season. Like I said, 214 away from football season. We'll try to get healthier together, and we'll try to be there along the way each and every day. Real quick news and notes before we end the show. A reminder that the LSU South Carolina women's game has now been moved to Friday. If you're going, give me a shout out. Let me know. I think me and I don't think the live producer Allie is coming in town, but I might have to drag Pastor Betty Sue, my mom, down there and come on down for the game. So if you're going, let me know. Hope to see some of y'all there. It's a big game. It's odd because it got moved up to 5 p.m., but it'll still be a big game nonetheless. Nationally televised on ESPN would be a massive win. And also it would be great to it's been confusing because there's only 2 undefeated teams left. South Carolina obviously is behind UCLA. there's a lot of season left, but this will go a long way in determining who's a 1 seed, not only in the SEC tournament, which will be big, but also the national tournament overall. So make sure you tune into that, and make sure you tune into the show tomorrow. That is all for today. My name is Chris. We'll see y'all later.